It's election night in San Diego County. Thank you for joining us for our KPBS primary election special. I'm Trabulsi.
And I'm Amita. Sharma. Results are still coming in at this hour. We have live team coverage tonight. Andrew Bowen and Tanya Thorne are at the Democratic and Republican watch parties.
And John Carroll is at the San Diego County Registrar of Voters, and MG Perez is here in the newsroom. We begin tonight with the presidential race as California takes part in Super Tuesday.
Well, thank you very much. They call it Super Tuesday for a reason. This is a big one. And they tell me...
And former President Donald Trump is celebrating his primary victories tonight, growing his lead in the delegate count. Republican presidential hopeful Nikki Haley has pledged to stay in the race through Super Tuesday. And KPBS reporter MG Perez joins us live from the newsroom with a look at where things stand at this hour. MG.
Well, Maya, it wouldn't be Super Tuesday without some surprises. So let's start there. Former U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley pulled out an unexpected win in the Vermont primary tonight, picking up that state's 17 Republican delegates. She defeated Donald Trump with a margin of 50% to his 45%. And here in California tonight, there was no surprise for the biggest haul of Super Tuesday delegates. 169 delegates go to Donald Trump with 75% of the vote. Nikki Haley at 21%. And of course, Ron DeSantis was still on the ballot. On the Democratic side, Joe Biden wins overwhelmingly with 90.4% of the vote. That is, Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips bringing in the end of that race. But here are more races that we are looking at following the top two.
Okay, well, as MG said, here are more of the races that we are following tonight, where the top two vote getters move on to November. First up, the U.S. Senate seat previously held by the late Senator Dianne Feinstein. The field includes Democrats Barbara Lee, Katie Porter, and Adam Schiff, as well as Republicans Eric Early, and Steve Garvey. And because Feinstein died in office, the seat appears on the ballot twice. Here, we are looking at the results for the full 6-year term, and as you can see, Adam Schiff has the lead so far at 36.7%, with Steve Garvey at 29.2% of the vote. And now we are looking at the top three for a partial term. The partial term will only be occupied by the winner for a few weeks before the full term takes over. Voters were able to choose the same candidate for both or split it between two. In the U.S. House of Representatives, the 49th District is one to watch. Incumbent Democrat Mike Levin is facing challenges from 4 Republicans: Cheryl Adams, Matt Gunderson, Kate Monroe, and Cecilia Margarita Wilkinson. Here, as it stands now, Mike Levin is in the lead at 55.2%, with Matt Gunderson behind at 23.6%. And the only statewide measure on the ballot, Proposition 1. It would fund a $6.4 billion bond to expand California's mental health and substance abuse treatment infrastructure. It would also require counties to prioritize housing for people who are chronically homeless. And so far, the yes votes are having it at 52.6% of the vote with these early returns. 2 top leadership roles in the city of San Diego are on the ballot. Current San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria is running for a second term. He is facing 4 challengers in this primary: Jane Glasson, Genevieve Jones-Wright, and Dan Smykowski and Larry Turner. And results so far show Todd Gloria with a healthy lead at 52.5%, with Larry Turner at 23.5%. And current city attorney Mara Elliott is terming out after 8 years in office. 2 Democrats are in the running: Chief Deputy City Attorney Heather Ferbert and State Assembly Member Brian Mainshine. And as you can see, Heather Ferbert has the lead currently at 52.2%, with Brian Mainshine at 47.8% of the vote. Even if one of them gets more than 50% of the vote, both will move on to the general election in November.
And we have two analysts joining us for reaction as the results continue to come in. Thad Kauser, professor of political science at UC San Diego, and Art Castaneras, publisher and editor-at-large for La Prensa San Diego. Welcome to both of you. So we're going to dive into the presidential race. I think we all know that the nominees are going to be President Biden on the Democratic side, and the Republican nominee for president will be Donald Trump. That said, when you look at the results of the presidential primary today, the super primary, or the Super Tuesday primaries, what leaps out at you?
Well, it's now crystal clear that the race, the matchup that almost nobody says they want in American politics, a rematch between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, is the one that nearly everyone's voting for. So even though there's been so much punditry about, are these candidates too old? Are they too extreme? Do we need something new? Voters in state after state after state backed one of these candidates by really strong margins. So I think that shows something, right? But one, it makes it almost a mathematical certainty that each will clinch the nomination, and we're not going to see voters change their mind. We may see some changes in the line. There are things that can happen between now and November, but it won't be because voters have changed their mind. Second, we see Nikki Haley getting the excuse she needs to stay in the election. She's won a state, Vermont. The voters have spoken. That gives her a reason to stay in and hang around. Right? It's a tiny state, but it's still a win. And she's racked up fairly large numbers, that this is now much more than just a protest vote. And it shows there is some Never Trump constituency for Nikki Haley. And she's going to ride this out and see where the former president's legal troubles go. The third thing that I see is we're not seeing huge Democratic turnout overall, and especially for Joe Biden. So if you look at San Diego County, Joe Biden won that by more than 20 points in 2020. If you look at the total votes that are counted so far between Democrats and Republicans for president, it's only about 55 to 45 on the Democratic side. What does that tell you? It tells you that there's an enthusiasm gap, that Joe Biden hasn't really rallied his base, hasn't yet made the case to voters, particularly young voters, that they need to stick with him in this election.
So, Art, what does Biden need to do to energize the vote in November? And, I mean, with the fact that Trump is also losing younger voters, what do both need to do to energize some of these people?
Well, I think the primary is always a bad example, because to Democrats and to Republicans, there's nothing at stake tonight. They know, the Democrats know Biden's going to win, the Republicans know that Trump's going to win, but in November it's all or nothing. And so you're going to see a lot of people come out. You're going to see this negative vote that Trump has had. The people he's losing the most are suburban women, and they're just turned off by him. So you see Nikki Haley, when she's picking up 38% of the vote, that is, as Thad says, that's more than a protest vote. Those are people that do not want to vote for Donald Trump. And so you see that in the primary. I think the low turnout, the apathy right now is just the Democrats don't see that there's anything at stake. I don't think that's exactly representative of what will happen in November.
Okay, so let's move on to the U.S. Senate race. It looks like, at this point, that it's going to be Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff against former baseball star and Republican Steve Garvey. Adam Schiff spent millions of dollars to face off with Steve Garvey in November, with the idea that Garvey's a Republican, we're in an overwhelmingly blue state, and that's just a cakewalk for him in November. But how much of this strategy is a result of our top two primary system?
Right, it's entirely a strategy dictated by trying to game this new system, right? So think back to 10 years ago when the top two primary comes in. The big hope of the top two was that by advancing two candidates, regardless of their party, to the November election, we wouldn't see only Democratic versus Republican matchups. We might see two Democrats. And as the state has become increasingly blue, that's what would deliver more competition. That's what would make a race competitive all the way through until November in this fairly deeply blue state. But that hasn't happened. We didn't see it happen. Think back to our last governor's race and the Senate race in 2022, and every single constitutional race down the ballot, lieutenant governor, attorney general, all of them had a Democrat versus a Republican. And Adam Schiff knew that if he could just face off against a Republican, that he would have the advantage in November, and so he picked his opponent. This prodigious fundraiser became the fundraiser for both the Garvey campaign and the Schiff campaign. He spent his money to elevate Adam Schiff, to eliminate his biggest threat, Katie Porter, and that strategy seems to be working tonight.
Do voters get the best candidate when this happens, when the system is gamed?
No, of course not. And we see it. There are three perfect examples tonight. We see what happened with Schiff and Garvey. Carl DeMaio, who's now ahead, and he supported the Democrat to make sure that he had a Democratic challenger, and it seems to have worked. Well, the one that didn't work was in San Diego. Supporters of Todd Gloria were actively supporting the only Republican in that race who had no chance of winning, but that would be the weakest candidate for him in the general. It didn't work. She's now in 4th place, and Todd looks like Todd Gloria looks like he's drawing the worst matchup for him, which is Larry Turner.
And we're going to get to that race, but before we leave this segment, I do want to talk to you about the 49th Congressional District.
Yes.
This is a race where it looks like there will be a Democratic incumbent, Mike Levin, facing off with Matt Gunderson, a Republican, but there's a huge gap between those two. I mean, Levin is way ahead of Matt Gunderson at this point. This used to be a toss-up district. What happened?
Well, this was the battleground, but Mike Levin has now won 3 races, right? Starting off in that battle royale in 2018 when he emerged from a big spending primary and flipped the district. And then he's run 2 races where he spent millions of dollars. There have been tens of millions or sometimes pouring in from national sources to boost him. And through those campaigns, voters have become familiar with him, and through his governing, right? He's in the district. He's talking about what he's bringing back to the district. Just any incumbent who gets to serve for 3 terms establishes a relationship with voters, and it looks like that now is insulating Mike Levin against any kind of national political tides, and that puts him in the driver's seat. But remember, he's only so far gotten 55% of the vote.
Right.
And if Republicans can consolidate support in favor of one candidate, and there's a huge year for Republicans, this could shift slightly into that battleground territory.
Right, right. Okay, well, we're going to close it there temporarily. We will be back. Back to you, Maya.
Thanks, Amita. And Democrats in San Diego County gathered tonight to watch the results as they come in. KPBS reporter Andrew Bowen is live downtown. Andrew, how is it out there?
Well, Maya, things are definitely winding down here at the West End Gas Lamp. The crowd is thinning a little bit, but there's still some energy in the room. This is where the San Diego County Democratic Party is holding its election night watch party. And we saw the results post on the wall on the projector a couple of hours ago, and the crowd is feeling pretty happy about them. San Diego County is increasingly an overwhelmingly blue county. And now earlier we heard remarks from City Council member Stephen Whitburn. He was facing 3 challengers to represent District 3 on the City Council. Some saw him as perhaps a bit vulnerable because his former Chief of Staff, Jesus Cardenas, just pleaded guilty to fraudulently obtaining COVID-19 relief funds. Cardenas no longer works for Stephen Whitburn, and this scandal doesn't really appear to have hurt Whitburn at the ballot box. He got a majority of the vote, and he looks very well positioned ahead of the runoff in November. Now, later in the evening, we heard Mayor Todd Gloria make some remarks to this crowd. He's also feeling very confident with these early results, having more than 50% of the vote despite 4 other challengers in the race for mayor. Let's hear a bit of what he had to say to the crowd tonight.
I think tonight really is about a couple of things. First off is the rejection of the division and the divisiveness that we see often at the national level that unfortunately has permeated our politics, but that is a resounding endorsement for candidates like Stephen and like Marnie and like others who are all about making sure we move forward. That's right. And tonight's results are an endorsement of continuing to do things that we have done together over the last 4 years. Pave more roads, house more homeless people, build more affordable homes for working and middle-class San Diegans, and keeping San Diego one of the safest big cities in this country. That is what we've endeavored to do under the most difficult of circumstances over the last 4 years. It is what we will continue to do when we get 4 more years this November.
Now, Maya, we're all watching who comes in second place in this race. Now, currently, that position is held by San Diego police officer Larry Turner, officially a no-party preference voter. However, he has certainly appealed to the more conservative voters of San Diego. There is a big asterisk around this race, however. Supporters of Todd Gloria have filed a lawsuit claiming that Larry Turner failed to establish legal residency in the city of San Diego by the required deadline. We're expecting a ruling from the judge in that case in a couple of weeks. If it is determined that Turner did not establish residency in the city on time, that second place runoff slot would go to the third place candidate, who is currently attorney Genevieve Jones-Wright. Back to you in the studio, Maya.
Thanks so much for that report, Andrew. And while San Diego County has trended more blue in the past few elections, Republicans are hoping to pick up more seats in the state legislature and Congress. KPBS reporter Tanya Thorne is live downtown where local Republicans are gathering tonight. Tanya, what can you tell us?
Hi, Maya, Amita. Yes, we're here at the U.S. Grand Hotel in downtown San Diego, where Republicans held their election night watch party. And things here are starting to wrap up. There's still a couple of people here keeping the party going. But just a little while ago, the room was filled with Republican supporters and candidates awaiting the results of this primary election. And the Republican candidates here remaining hopeful about taking California back in this next election. Here's Bill Wells, the current mayor of El Cajon, who is currently running for Congress for the 51st Congressional District.
People have had enough. They want their country back. They want their quality of life back. They want to be able to live safely on their streets and know that their border is secure and that the people that commit crimes are going to be punished.
And Bill Wells is up against incumbent Democratic candidate Sarah Jacobs, who is currently holding the 51st Congressional District seat, but she was leading in the polls today. So we will have to see how that plays out in November. But for now, we'll be giving you some more live updates here. Back to you in the studio.
Thanks so much, Tanya. And 3 San Diego City Council members up for re-election are running unopposed, but 2 incumbents are facing challengers, and another seat is currently unfilled. Let's start with Council District 3, which includes downtown, Hillcrest, North Park, and Old Town. It is represented by Stephen Whitburn. He is facing challenges from Home Energy Inspector Ellis California Jones, public interest attorney Colleen Cusack, and philanthropy writer Kate Collin. And here are the latest results we have for you tonight, with Stephen Whitburn in the lead with quite a healthy lead at 55.5% of the votes, with Colleen Cusack at 18.1%. District 4, which includes many southeast neighborhoods, is without an incumbent after Monica Montgomery Stepp left for the County Board of Supervisors. The 3 candidates are Montgomery Stepp's Chief of Staff Henry Foster III, mayoral aide Chida Warren Darby, and State Senate Assistant Tylisa Sewsbury. And as you can see, 53.5% of the vote so far is going to Henry Foster III, with Chida Warren Darby in second, 27.3%. And District 9, which covers City Heights, College area, and Kensington, is held by Council President Sean Elo Rivera. He is facing 2 challengers, retired police officer Terry Hoskins and small business owner Fernando Garcia. Sean Elo Rivera holding on to the seat, 48.5% of the vote, with Terry Hoskins at 33.6%. Turning now to the second largest city in San Diego County, Chula Vista. The Chula Vista City Attorney race is between Bart Maisfeld and Marco Verdugo. Taking a look at the numbers, Marco Verdugo has a healthy lead at 58.3%. Bart Maisfeld has 41.8% of the vote. Whoever wins this election will be sworn into office. 5 candidates are in the running to represent Chula Vista City Council District 3. They are Leticia Munguia, Michael Inzunza, David Alcaraz, and Daniel Rice-Vasquez, and Christos Corgan. In the lead is Michael Inzunza with 50.2%, quite dominating the lead right now, and Leticia Munguia at 16.6%, with Daniel Rice-Vasquez at 14.6%. So the top 2 vote getters here move on to November. And 6 candidates are vying for Chula Vista Council District 4. The seat was held by Andrea Cardenas, who is facing charges of felony fraud, grand theft, and money laundering. She resigned last month, but is still on the ballot. Also on the ballot, Christine Brady, Delfina Gonzalez, Cesar Fernandez, Rudy Ramirez, and Jose Sarmiento. 2 will move on to the general election. And looking at the latest results, Cesar Fernandez is at 22.7%, Rudy Ramirez is at 19.6%, and Andrea Cardenas is still receiving votes, and she's at 19.2%.
And let's check in with our analyst here in studio, Thad Kauser, UC San Diego political science professor, and Art Castaneras, publisher and editor-at-large for La Prensa San Diego. Thad, let's talk about Proposition 1. This is a measure that would set aside $6 billion in housing and mental health treatment centers for what's being called California's humanitarian crisis of homelessness, mental illness, and addiction. How big of a panacea is this money if Proposition 1 passes?
Well, Gavin Newsom has been the big proponent of this, is placing a big bet on this being the thing that allows him to fulfill his long-stalled campaign pledges to really make a dent in California's housing and homelessness crisis. But this proposition doesn't provide a lot of new money, right? It mostly sort of redirects and recycles existing tax revenues. And then $6 billion, that sounds like a lot, but you know, if you tried to build a house in California lately, right, it's only going to go so far. And so I think he now really clearly owns the issue of homelessness in California, especially if this passes, and voters will hold him to account when they're looking at his future ambitions about whether this is really enough to make a dent in a major problem.
Nonetheless, it is doing well. Is it doing well? Is it being supported? Because voters see this crisis every single time they walk outside.
Yeah, that's what it is. Homelessness has become a #1 issue. You see it everywhere you go. You see it in downtown San Diego. You see what the images we see from Los Angeles and Oakland and other cities. So it is a top priority. So it is not unheard of here that people would tax themselves in a bond and want to redirect money. But it's not going to solve things overnight. This is a long-term problem that's going to take a lot of home building and shelters, but also mental health.
And it doesn't sound like immediately a lot of that money is going to trickle down to San Diego County to help its 10,000 unhoused people.
Well, there is money for this in the county, and it just redirects and changes how that money will be spent. So it's part of a larger investment that the state has made over recent years in addressing this. And a lot of data show that has been helpful in getting individuals who are unhoused back into housing and often into treatment. But the problem is there's so much new supply of newly homeless San Diegans and Californians all across the state that it's really hard for the state to keep up.
Okay, let's move on to the 75th Assembly District. We get another chance to talk about California's top 2 primary system. So we have a familiar name in San Diego County. Former Republican San Diego City Councilman Carl DeMaio is leading. He really wanted as his opponent Democrat Kevin Juza. It looks like he's going to get his wish. Right. So again, this strategy keeps on working. Is there going to ever be an effort to change these rules?
Well, I think the only way to do it is if we change the structure. The top 2, obviously, as we talked about before, doesn't always yield the top 2 best candidates, right? So in this case, Carl played the system. He came into the race late. There was already a Republican-endorsed candidate backed by the party, backed by a lot of elected officials. He jumps in with a lot of money, but he spent a lot of that money supporting the Democrat. And he pushed that Democrat up. I don't know if he can take credit by himself, but he pushed the Democrat up to 2nd place. And now in a heavily Republican district, he's a huge favorite to win that race in November. So it seems to have worked for him.
Okay, I want to turn our attention before we leave this segment to the San Diego mayoral race. So Mayor Gloria is leading by a wide margin, but it looks like his nearest opponent is the guy that he didn't want, San Diego police officer Larry Turner. Now, Art, you endorsed Genevieve Jones-Wright in this race. What do these results indicate to you right now?
Well, if I was the mayor of San Diego, who's been elected for the past 20 years to 3 different offices, city council, the assembly, and now mayor, and is only running at 52% of the vote against 3 really unknown people that spent tens of thousands of dollars, $40,000 I think is what Turner spent, and he's at 33%. That means people don't really want to vote for Todd Gloria. So if I were Todd Gloria, I'd be concerned that a former Marine, current San Diego police officer who looks like a Marine, completely different physically and in his stances, is running against Todd Gloria in this runoff. He would be the favorite for Republicans, independents, and a lot of conservative Democrats. This is a tough race in November. Todd, if I were the mayor, I'd be really worried.
So you live in San Diego. Well, do you live in San Diego?
I'm not in the city. I'm in the county.
San
yes.
Diego. So when you follow some of San Diego politics, what do you think Mayor Todd Gloria's strengths are?
Well, I think he's a strong communicator. As Art said, he has a lot of reservoir of good feeling from people. He's served people in a lot of ways for a long time. And that's helped him buffet some of the problems, right, of dealing with the rise in homelessness that's happened while he's been mayor. You know, even though he's been pushing on this issue, he has not made headway. We saw the floods of January really show the lapses in the city's infrastructure, and especially the equity in that infrastructure. And so I think Todd Gloria has not faced a major challenger because he has that familiarity. People expected him to win. I agree that this is not a strong showing tonight, and it reminds us that San Diego was a very competitive city for the mayor's race not long ago. So remember, going back to Pete Wilson, also a former Marine, people like Susan Golden, people like Police Chief Jerry Sanders. There are a lot of models for a Larry Turner type candidacy to be competitive. Will these results tempt Republican donors to put the strong money they need into a race like this? Could potentially become competitive.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up there again temporarily. We'll come back to the subject of Mayor Todd Gloria in our next segment.
Thank you, and thank you for that insight. And the polls closed almost 2.5 hours ago, so the first batch of votes from around the county have now been tabulated. KPBS reporter John Carroll is live at the Registrar of Voters office with what we know so far. John, tell us.
Hey Maya, it's pretty quiet out here right now, although about 5 minutes ago we saw a whole bunch of people, about 20 people, leave the registrar's office. There must still be some poll workers in there, or rather tabulation folks in there, because there's no way all the votes are back in yet. But that is what's happening right now. Votes are being tabulated inside the registrar's office. Earlier today, we saw a very long line of cars here dropping off their ballots. But this is what it looked like about a half hour before the polls closed. What was that steady stream of cars from earlier had slowed to just a trickle at this point. But keep in mind that even though this is the central focus of everything vote-related in the county, when it comes to casting a vote, it was just one of more than 200 places where you could cast your vote throughout this county. We got a look at the operation inside earlier today. First, the ballots are all extracted from their envelopes. Then they're sent to be tabulated. Assistant Registrar of Voters Sean Brom says votes will continue to be counted until around 1 a.m. There are two groups of votes, the known ones that were either already here or will be here before the night is out, and the unknown ones.
And then there are still the unknown amount that we will estimate that are coming from the post office that are going to be postmarked today and may be received up until a week later.
So the votes will be continue to be counted throughout the evening until the votes from the last voting center are in, and then they're expecting that people can go home here in that building after that. Then there is time for voters who didn't sign their ballot or something else may be out of whack, time for them to come in and cure their vote or fix it. That lasts until April 2nd, and then the Registrar of Voters must certify the vote by April 4th. Maya?
And John, how does this turnout in this election so far track with the turnout that we saw in the 2020 primary?
Well, that's a good question, because that's the apples to apples question. We had the gubernatorial one a couple of years ago, but for a presidential primary year, I did ask Sean Brom about that, and he says that they're pretty close at this point. Of course, the caveat is that we still have more votes coming in, and there will be votes coming in throughout the next week, at least from the Postal Service. But right now, they're looking to be about the same in the upper 30% area.
Super Tuesday results are still rolling in. Thank you for staying with us for our KPBS primary election special. I'm Maya Trabulsi.
And I'm Amita Sharma. We have live team coverage tonight, as well as two analysts joining us in studio. Thad Kauser, Professor of Political Science at UC San Diego, and Art Castaneras, Publisher and Editor-at-Large of La Prensa. We'll check in with them in a few minutes.
Yeah, and first an update on the contest the nation is watching, the Republican presidential race. And KPBS reporter MG Perez joins us live from the newsroom with a look at where things stand at this hour? MG, tell us.
Maya, as we mentioned earlier, there were a couple of surprises on this Super Tuesday. Former U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley picked up an unexpected win in the Vermont primary, winning the state's 17 Republican delegates. She defeated Donald Trump with a margin of 50% to his 45%. That's added to her win in the District of Columbia on Sunday. She is still well behind Trump, of course, and here in California, as you can see there, Donald Trump wins at 75.2% of the vote, Nikki Haley at 20.8%, and Ron DeSantis is still on the ballot there. On the Democratic side, Joe Biden wins overwhelmingly with about 93.3% of the vote, and Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips fill out the rest of that contest. The other surprise came in the U.S. territory of American Samoa, where President Joe Biden came up short in the caucus there. He was defeated by Jason Palmer. Who is Jason Palmer, you ask? Well, until tonight, he was an unknown candidate. He's a Baltimore businessman also running for the Democratic nomination. Palmer took 4 of the American Samoa delegates. Biden took 2. In the newsroom, MG Perez, KPBS News.
And Democrats and Republicans are battling for control of the House and Senate, and California could play a role. Let's check in on the U.S. Senate race. This is the seat previously held by the late Senator Dianne Feinstein. The field includes Democrats Barbara Lee, Katie Porter, and Adam Schiff, as well as Republicans Eric Early and Steve Garvey. And with these returns, we're seeing Adam Schiff has the lead at 36.4%. And it sounds like we are calling it for Adam Schiff and Steve Garvey to head into the general election. Adam Schiff is at 36.4% with Steve Garvey at 29.3%. In the House of Representatives, the 49th district is one to watch. Incumbent Democrat Mike Levin is facing challenges from 4 Republicans: Cheryl Adams, Matt Gunderson, Kate Monroe, and Cecilia Margarita Wilkinson. And here's how it's looking right now. Mike Levin with a healthy lead at 55.1%. He's got a very wide margin there over Matt Gunderson with 23.6% of the vote. And the only statewide measure on the ballot, Prop 1. It would fund a $6.4 billion bond to expand the state's mental health and substance abuse treatment infrastructure. It would also require counties to prioritize housing for people who are chronically homeless. Looking at the numbers, we are seeing San Diego has got the yes votes at 52.5%. The no's are at 47.5% for Proposition 1. It is a big night for the city of San Diego with 2 top leadership roles on the ballot. Current San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria is running for his 2nd term. He's facing 4 challengers in this primary: Jane Glasson, Genevieve Jones-Wright, Dan Smykowski, and Larry Turner. Results so far are showing Todd Gloria is at 52.5%. Larry Turner is at 23.5%, with Genevieve Jones-Wright is at 13.8%. And current city attorney Mara Elliott is terming out after 8 years in office. 2 Democrats are in the running: Chief Deputy City Attorney Heather Ferbert and State Assembly Member Brian Mainshine. And even if one of them gets more than 50% of the vote, both will move on to the November race. And we're seeing Heather Ferbert is at 52.2%, with Brian Mainshine is at 47.8%.
Joining us now to talk more about the latest results and more races, we're following Thad Kauser, Professor of Political Science at UC San Diego, and Art Castaneras, Publisher and Editor-at-Large for La Prensa San Diego. Welcome back to both of you. I want to start by discussing the San Diego City Attorney's race. It looks like at this point it's you only have 2 candidates in this race. Deputy City Attorney Heather Ferbert is competing against Democratic Assemblyman Brian Mainshine. Heather Ferbert right now is at 52% and Brian Mainshine is at 47%. So again, both of them are going to face off in November. Are the results at this point narrow enough for them to flip in November, Art?
Oh yeah, this is a totally different turnout that we'll see in November. It's a very low turnout. We're at 20% exactly right now in San Diego, very low. So it's disproportionate. It's kind of, it's not representative of the real turnout that you would see in November. So it's anybody's race. These are 2 well-known folks with a lot of money, a lot of backing. So I don't think there's any way to call this race for November yet.
So speaking of backing, I know that Mara Elliott, the current city attorney, has endorsed Heather Ferbert. At this point, it looks like it's a boon, but could it be a hindrance as this campaign plays out toward November?
I think in the mayor's race and in the city attorney race and also in the supervisorial race with Kevin Faulconer running against the incumbent Reamer, you're going to see one issue that I think will be the big issue in November, 101 Ash Street. The building that for the last couple of years has been this albatross around the city's neck. They're about $200 million into a building that's worthless right now. It's probably a tear down. And it's going to be, what did Mara Elliott do and what did Ferbert do while she was in that office during the time that that building was a problem. So I think the Brian Maysheim is going to make that an issue. I think anybody running against Todd Gloria is going to make it an issue. And I guarantee you that Lawson Reamer is going to make it an issue against Kevin Faulconer.
And the double-edged sword for Brian Maysheim is the fact that he was a Republican before he was a Democrat, right? And he survived that flip and was reelected in a really tight race in his assembly district, but those were voters who really knew him. What about this citywide constituency? Does he have the trust of Democrats? Does he still have some remaining support with Republicans? That will be a big part of what tells the tale of this race in November.
Okay, we've got to race through some of the next races. So let's talk about District 4 in the San Diego City Council. On the San Diego City Council. In that race, Monica Montgomery Stepp, who was elected to the Board of Supervisors, has endorsed Henry Foster. He appears to be in a huge lead. He's got 53% to Chida Warren Darby's 27%. Again, at this point, is it possible that he might win this race outright today?
I think so. I think he's way ahead. He's very popular in that district, and the backing of Monica Montgomery Stepp is almost the seal of approval there that guarantees him a win.
Okay, and we cannot leave this segment without talking about District 4 in Chula Vista. So this is a very interesting race. It's been tumultuous, to say the least, with incumbent Andrea Cardenas resigning, pleading guilty to grand theft charges. And yet it was too late to take her off the ballot. She's been kind of cagey about whether she would actually serve if she wins, if she makes it to the November election, and if she wins that election. Why or why not hasn't she made it clear?
Well, because I think they're hedging their bets on whether or not she can get the judge to reduce the charges that she pled guilty to a misdemeanor, which would allow her to serve if she were to be elected. But let me tell you, I don't think she's cagey at all. We can prove that up to today, Jesus Cardenas, her brother, was running digital campaign ads for her, still running this campaign. So they go to court and they say that she resigned and she's suspending her campaign, yet in the background they're still actively trying to keep her alive. She's only at 20 votes behind right now. We don't know whether or not she'll make this runoff, but if she makes the runoff and she doesn't get sentenced until August, if she gets sentenced to a felony, she can't serve, even if she wins. But if she gets sentenced to a misdemeanor and wins, she'll be back in office in December.
Okay, and I should say that you endorsed Delfina Gonzalez in this race. So this is a District 4 in Chula Vista that has a big homelessness problem. They almost lost a beloved park. What kind of impact does a scandal have on a district?
Well, it's demoralizing, and your area and your community is in the news for the wrong reasons, but it also means the person representing you is distracted, right? They're worried about their own career and their own freedom, really, and not doing the things always to bring support back for your district. So it's a big issue, but people are also forgiving often of their own. And I think what you're seeing in the so far surprisingly strong showing of Andrea Cardenas is that at least 20% of those voters in her district who have voted for her before are still with her. And that's something we see often after scandals.
Okay, we're going to close it there.
And San Diego Democrats and their supporters gathered downtown tonight to watch the election results and hear from candidates. KPBS reporter Andrew Bowen is live there now with an update. Andrew, what can you tell us?
Well, Maya, of course, one of the big races that we're watching tonight is that for San Diego City Council District 4. As you heard earlier in the show, this seat was vacated by Monica Montgomery Stepp, who was elected to the County Board of Supervisors, and she happened to endorse the candidate who's standing next to me right now, Henry Foster III, who is currently in first place with just over 50% of the vote. Mr. Foster, I have to assume you're feeling pretty good tonight. How's your night going?
Night is going fantastic. We're excited. And we're continuing to watch and monitor the results, but we're very happy with the early returns.
You know, you're the second place candidate, and this was endorsed by Mayor Todd Gloria. You were endorsed by your former boss, Monica Montgomery Stepp. What do you think this race was really about?
Well, I think this race is about the people. And I think the work that we have done while the supervisor was in office, I think it speaks volumes. And I think it speaks to the results that you see tonight. And ensuring that we continue to put the people first. And the commitment that we have all made is to ensure that we are bringing the voices of District 4 to City Hall.
I'm sure you've spoken to a lot of voters in District 4 throughout this campaign. What are some of the issues that they talk to you about? What do they want you to see you do as a city council member?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think they really feel that their voices haven't been heard, especially with the vacation of the seat. There's been a lot of decisions that have been made. We just recently experienced the disaster of the floods, and I think they are really looking forward to representation. I think they have spoken and like I said with the early returns, have really selected the candidate of their choice. And so I think first and foremost is coming to the dais and ensuring that we are putting the people of District 4 first. And that's what I plan to do.
Thank you so much. Henry Foster III, currently in first place for San Diego City Council District 4. Now, this race will not see a runoff if a candidate receives more than 50% of the vote. So certainly be watching those returns as they continue to come in the coming days and weeks. Back to you in the studio, Maya.
Thanks, Andrew. And yes, we will be watching. California is a key battleground for congressional races where Republicans are looking to flip some blue seats, and one of those seats is in San Diego County. KPBS reporter Tanya Thorne is live downtown where local Republicans they're gathering tonight. Tanya?
Yes, Maya, we're still here at the Republican Watch Party where there's still a small group behind me celebrating this election night. And that's because one of the key races that they're following and we've been following is the 49th district. And that's because that's one being challenged by 4 Republican candidates. That seat is currently held by Democrat Mike Levin. We spoke to Kate Monroe, one of the Republican candidates here earlier today, and here are some of the issues she said she would work on.
The border needs to be closed. We have a massive homeless problem all throughout California, certainly here, buttoned in by downtown San Diego and north in Oceanside. We have thousands of homeless people. I have a very good solution to stop all the homeless, drugs, lawlessness that we have going on in our state.
And as results trickle in, we can see that Congressman Levin is in the lead with about 55% of the vote, with his closest opponent, Matt Gunderson, at 23%. Monroe had about 8% of the vote. And things here at the Republican Party starting to wrap up, but it's a fight that we will see go on and move on into the November election. But for now, live in downtown San Diego, Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
Great. Thanks so much for that report. 3 San Diego City Council members up for re-election are running unopposed, but 2 incumbents are facing challengers, and 1 more seat is up for grabs. Council District 3, which includes downtown, Hillcrest, North Park, and Old Town, is currently represented by Stephen Whitburn. He is facing challenges from home Energy Inspector California Jones, public interest attorney Colleen Cusack, and philanthropy writer Kate Collin. And Stephen Whitburn has a very wide margin at 55.5% of the vote. Colleen Cusack is at 18.1%, and Kate Collin is at 16.9%. District 4 which includes many southeast neighborhoods, is without an incumbent after Monica Montgomery Stepp left for the County Board of Supervisors. The three candidates are Montgomery Stepp's Chief of Staff, we just heard, Henry Foster III, mayoral aide Chida Warren Darby, and State Senate Assistant Tylisa Sewsbury. Henry Foster III has a very healthy lead at 53.5%. Chida Warren Darby is at 27.3%, and Tylisa Sewsbury is at 19.2%. And District 9, which covers City Heights, College area, and Kensington, is held by Council President Sean Elo Rivera. He is facing two challengers, retired police officer Terry Hoskins and small business owner Fernando Garcia. Sean Elo Rivera is holding on to that lead at 48.5%. Terry Hoskins is at 33, just over 33% of the vote, and Fernando Garcia is almost at 18% of the vote. Now to check in on the races in the second largest city in San Diego County, Chula Vista. The Chula Vista City Attorney's race is between Bart Maisfeld and Marco Verdugo. Taking a look at the numbers, Marco Verdugo has the lead so far at 58.3%. Bart Maisfeld is at just almost 42% of the vote, and whoever wins this election will be sworn into office. 5 candidates are in the running to represent Chula Vista City Council District 3. They are Leticia Manguia, Michael Nzunza, David Alcarez, and Daniel Rice Vasquez, and Christos Corgan. And as of now, Michael Nzunza holds a very healthy lead at just over 50% of the vote, with Leticia Manguia at 16.6%. Daniel Rice Vasquez is at 14.6%. And 6 candidates are vying for Chula Vista Council District 4. This seat was held by Andrea Cardenas, who is facing charges of felony fraud, grand theft, and money laundering. She resigned last month and said that she would not campaign, but is still on the ballot. Running to replace her are Christine Brady, Delfina Gonzalez, Cesar Fernandez, Rudy Ramirez, and Jose Sarmiento. 2 will move on to the general election. And the votes so far are showing Cesar Fernandez in the lead at 22.7%, with Rudy Ramirez just over 19.5%, and Andrea Cardenas still getting votes at 19%. And though the polls have been closed since 8 o'clock tonight, votes are still being tabulated at the Registrar of Voters office in Kearny Mesa, and that is where KPBS reporter John Carroll is live with the very latest. John.
Maya, we're getting our first info on turnout on the amount of votes cast from around the county. Assistant Registrar of Voters Sean Brom tells me there are about 385,000 votes in that group. But keep in mind, votes will continue to come in here as the night goes on, because as you know, this is a very large county and there are vote centers far flung. So it takes a while to get the whole vote center packed up, closed down, and then the votes back in here to the registrar's office. Now, in the final hour of voting, less people were showing up here to vote than we saw earlier in the day. The cars, that was a long line of cars earlier, had slowed to just a trickle by the time we shot this video. Earlier, we got a look inside at the operation. Ballots are first removed from the envelopes, then they're tabulated. I spoke with Assistant Registrar of Voters Sean Brom earlier this evening about what will happen from here on out.
What we'll see are the add-on counts from the vote centers, which were approximately 50,000 that were voted upon today. So those will be the add-on counts onto the 384,000, and then we will put the projected amount of ballots of the known that we will count that we've picked up today, and then also what will come in the mail that are timely and validly cast.
Now, votes could be mailed in as late as today, as long as they have a today postmark. After that, the registrar will send out notifications to people that didn't sign their ballot and allow them to cure it, as they say, or to fix the problem. That will wrap up on April 2nd, and then the Registrar of Voters is required to certify the election on April 4th. By the way, all the results are coming in every few minutes to KPBS, and you can see those results live up to the minute on kpbs.org. Live in Kearny Mesa at the Registrar of Voters office, John Carroll, KPBS News.
We want to check in one last time with our analyst here in studio, Thad Kauser, UC San Diego political science professor, and Art Castaneras, publisher and editor-at-large of La Prensa. So, I want to return to the San Diego mayor's race very briefly. Candidate Larry Turner is facing a lawsuit challenging whether he meets the residency requirements. How vulnerable is he on that, Art?
So there's a lawsuit contending that he didn't register in time and that he didn't actually live in the address that he says that he has. It's called a domicile rule. It's not just where you register to vote. It's whether or not your car is registered there, your car insurance, your driver's license, things like that. And so Larry's going to have to prove that he had the intent of actually living in this place, even though he admits that he and his family had been living in the city of El Cajon until just months before he registered to vote. So it's a real issue. I think it's going to have to go to court. Courts are very reluctant to take candidates off the ballot, especially when now, if he ends up in second place and the voters have spoken, I think it's going to be hard for a judge to kick him off. So unless he had no real roots in the city, and remember, he's a San Diego police officer, so it's not like he's a carpetbagger that moved from some other city or some other state. I think this is a contentious issue, but it's going to be resolved here sometime at the end of this month.
Okay, Thad, let's return briefly to the presidential race. A poll last month found that 86% of Americans think President Biden, who's 81, is too old to be president. Trump is 77. Biden is also facing a backlash because of what's happening in Gaza. How would you characterize these challenges to Biden's presidency?
They're a threat, and they're a threat especially, both of them, among young voters. And that's where Joe Biden really needs to shore up his support. You've seen the Democratic Party divide since early October over the war in Gaza. And this is a divide. We haven't seen the Democratic Party divided like this really since the Iraq War. And that was shortly followed with the Democratic defeat in the presidential race in 2004. This also looks and feels like 1968 when Vietnam War just tore the Democratic Party apart, especially at their nominating convention in Chicago.
And ironically, the Democratic convention is in Chicago.
In Chicago again, so it could be the whole world could be watching again. And so the real question, right, is Joe Biden's candidacy in 2020 was defined a bit by him, but mostly by Donald Trump, right? You like Biden, but you really hate Donald Trump. That was the pitch to Democratic voters. I think Democratic young voters are becoming more and more alienated with what they see as too tight a link between the Biden presidency and Israel. That's why Joe Biden is working so hard to get a ceasefire and try to show that he can bring Israel back from what they've been doing.
How successful do you think he'll be?
Well, we're going to see with the diplomacy. He's been successful in a lot of diplomacy in the Ukraine. He hasn't been so far successful in Israel. And I think his ability to show some successes in the Middle East will have a big role in whether voters who may think he's too old, but that's not a make or break issue for voters. A war is a make or break issue for especially young voters, young progressives right now in California and the U.S. as a whole.
Okay, and Art, at the same time, President Trump, the likely Republican nominee, faces 91 criminal charges, potentially multiple trials. A judge said in the civil case in E. Jean Carroll's case that he raped her. Trump has to pay millions of dollars in punitive damages. And on the campaign trail, he's been known to slur his words. He sometimes confuses Biden with former President Barack Obama. And yet his base seems solid, with the exception of younger Republicans. Explain that.
It is the MAGA movement that's taken over the party. The Republican Party no longer is a party of principles or of positions. It's a party of a person. It is a cult following. And so there's no way to explain it. They believe that this person is so anti-everything that he stands against all the things that they now hate, right? And all of a sudden now, the FBI can't be trusted, and courts can't be trusted, and government can't be trusted, but one man can be trusted. It's unheard of. We never thought we'd get to this almost a fascist state where it's a single person running the entire party. So it's a cult of personality.
But I think the way to explain it, though, is that Donald Trump has delivered for his Republican base, right? He delivered a victory in 2016 that people thought for a while after Barack Obama's 2 victories that were large victories. There was a sense the Republican Party was outmoded and its increasingly diverse country was never going to vote for Republican again. Donald Trump ended that. And he delivered on policies for his base. If you wanted tax cuts, you got that. If you wanted the overturning of Roe v. Wade, you got that from Donald Trump. So because of that, he built up this bulwark that has been impenetrable by any of these legal cases.
But by election standards, though, they lost in, after 16, they lost in 18, lost in 20, lost in 22. So it's been a bad stretch of election losses and court losses. Every single lawsuit they filed challenging the 2020 election has failed. So I think that those voters are locked in. What you see with Haley, though, when you see 20, 25, 26% of Republicans continuing to vote for anybody but Trump, if he loses half of that in a general election, he loses the election.
He's in trouble. Okay, I really, really want to talk about the U.S. Senate race. It looks like it will be Adam Schiff, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff, versus Republican Steve Garvey. This is the first time, Thad, in 32 years that a woman is not on the ballot for that U.S. Senate seat. What does that say? Is it regressive?
Yeah, this is not the way our trailblazing state wants to see itself, right? California sees itself as a land of opportunity and diversity. And yet, other than the Senate, we've had a glass ceiling in California politics, right? We haven't had a governor. We're one of the few states without a female governor ever. We've had almost entirely white governors, and we really haven't had the diversity at the very top of the ticket. And I think if we see the Adam Schiff versus Steve Garvey race, two older white men, right? That's going to be something that doesn't fit with California's image of itself.
Those are two good points, because the two senators that we currently have, both Padilla and Butler, were both appointed. And you have an African-American woman and you have a Latino male. And now we have two white men as the nominees for this runoff. So it is kind of regret. We're going backwards. California is very progressive. Our demographics, our vote turnout don't look like these two candidates that have now advanced to the November election.
But I have to add, I mean, two powerful women, Barbara Boxer, former U.S. Senator, and Nancy Pelosi, endorsed Adam Schiff. What makes him such an appealing candidate to them? They know what's at stake.
It's the power structure. He is in the power structure, and both of the women running have been a little bit of outsiders, and they haven't been 100% party activists, and they haven't been party leaders. And so I'm not surprised by that, and the amount of money that Schiff already had going into this race makes him, he had money, so much money to spare that he was supporting his Republican candidate. He got to spend extra money to choose his runoff opponent. That is an obscene amount of money.
But some of that money is going to go to Democratic candidates, you anticipate?
Yeah, I think really starting tomorrow, Adam Schiff stops running for the U.S. Senate because he's feeling in a really strong position in that seat, and he starts becoming this national Democratic Party leader who's raising money and sending that to the battleground races. So take a little bit of those tens of millions of dollars he just spent on Steve Garvey and spread it out $2 million at a time in tough congressional districts. He can help the party cause, and also we're not drawing more money into this race between two Democrats when really nothing's at stake ideologically in November. That's gonna free up more money across the country for tight races all over the place.
In about 50 seconds, I'd like you to talk to me about the Chula Vista City Attorney's race. I know that you endorsed Bart Maisfeld. And it looks like he's trailing. And it looks like it's going to be Verdugo. What should be the first order of business for the new city attorney? The city hasn't had a permanent city attorney in over a year.
Well, I've been advocating for reform to their electoral process, the campaign finance reform. The reason they've had some issues has been because it's been too lax.
I gave you too much time.
Thank you so much. We really do appreciate your insight to both of you. Yes, thank you to our guests, UC San Diego political science professor Thad Kauser and publisher editor-at-large of La Prensa, Art Castañeras.
That does it for our election night coverage. For the latest results,